Gregory Hayes' translation of the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius.
Yep.
And we left off on book 2, number 9. So I think we're going to pick it up with 10.
Right.
You want to go?
Sure. All right. In comparing sins the way people do, Theophrastus says that the ones committed out of desire are worse than the ones committed out of anger, which is good philosophy. The angry man seems to turn his back on reason out of a kind of pain and inner convulsion, but the man motivated by desire, who is mastered by pleasure, seems somehow more self-indulgent, less manly in his sins. Theophrastus is right and philosophically sound to say that the sin committed out of pleasure deserves a harsher rebuke than the one committed out of pain. The angry man is more like a victim of wrongdoing provoked by pain to anger. The other man rushes into wrongdoing on his own, moved to action by desire.
Man, what do you think about that?
This kind of reminds me of some Buddhism, echoes of Buddhism about being motivated by desire and how that's kind of your own fault and it causes more pain.
So, but how is anger like seemingly more understandable?
Well, like, I'm not really sure.
So you're kind of okay, because I was a little stuck on that.
I mean, people get angry over injustice. However, it's
Yeah, and I mean, like, so the thing is, to me, right?
mm-hmm.
I don't know. I guess I didn't read too many Zen Buddhist things.
Yeah.
But like to me, anger is a form. Anger is a symptom of desire, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like to me, as a person, like when I'm angry, it's because I desire that life is another way.
Yeah.
And so that like I have this expectation in my head. That expectation is unmet.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, I am angry. Like, I mean, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I get it.
So I guess to me, like, I don't see anger as a separate class of sin, to use the word here,
Yeah.
than desire. Like, you know, am I making sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Like, then what's considered desire?
I don't know, man. I tend to think it's all just grasping, fucking like this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know where I stand on that. Oh, so number 11 says, you could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. If the gods exist, then to abandon human beings is not frightening. The gods would never subject you to harm. And if they don't exist, or don't care what happens to us, what would be the point of hold on. What would be the point of living in a world without the gods of providence? But they do exist, they do care what happens to us, and everything a person needs to avoid real harm is placed within him. If there were anything harmful on the other side of death, they would have made sure that the ability to avoid it was within you. If it doesn't harm your character, how can it harm your life? Nature would not have overlooked such dangers through failing to recognize them, because it saw them as because it saw them but was powerless to prevent or correct them. Nor would it ever, through inability or incompetence, make such a mistake as to let good and bad things happen indiscriminately to good and bad alike. But death and life, success and failure, pain and pleasure, wealth and poverty. All these things happen to good and bad alike, and they are neither noble nor shameful, and hence neither good nor bad. Yeah, that mostly makes sense. Because I'm an idiot, I have problems with the God thing, and that's always going to be a thing.
Yeah. So much baggage with that word.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I would prefer that personally, dude. I would prefer that language was wiped from the face of the earth.
I mean, I don't blame you. It's that one word alone has caused so much pain and suffering.
Yeah, because people have different conceptions of what it means
Mm-hmm.
and what weight that carries with it.
Yeah.
Like, all right, so on a personal level, I get what this is saying because it's very much in line with the classical view of Stoicism that the most important thing is your character as a human being. That is, in essence, your life.
Yeah.
And death can't harm that unless you allow it.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole idea, though, of the gods wouldn't let good and bad things, like good and bad, indiscriminately happen to good and bad people alike.
Right.
I don't know if I'm down with that conception of the logos in general.
Mm-hmm.
For me personally, I'm kind of a deist, I guess. I I tend to think that if there is some divine entity, it more or less just set up the universe and disappeared.
Yeah. The popular conception was someone who just started a machine,
Yeah.
just left it running.
Yeah, and if that being were to become human, they would be subject to the same physical laws that it set in motion in the universe.
Right. Right.
Yeah. But that I don't like. Let me be clear, dudes. I don't care about your personal theology. I don't care about your religious beliefs. That's just my personal take.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very if this exists, then I think that. It's not like I'm saying that's actually what I believe.
Right.
Because I really I don't have any beliefs about that anymore.
Probably better off.
I tried having them again. It didn't work. So I just gave up.
Yeah, at least you tried.
Yeah.
The
Your turn.
speed with which all of them vanish, the objects in the world, the memory of them in time, and the real nature of the things our senses experience, especially those that entice us with pleasure or frighten us with pain, or are loudly trumpeted by pride. To understand those things, how stupid, contemptible, grimy, decaying, and dead they are, that's what our intellectual powers are for. And to understand what those people really amount to, whose opinions and voices constitute fame, and what dying is, and that if you look at it in the abstract and break down your imaginary ideas of it by logical analysis, you realize that it's nothing but a process of nature which only children can be afraid of, and not only a process of nature, but a necessary one, and how man grasps God with what part of himself he does so, and how that part is conditioned when he does.
Do you have any thoughts on this one?
The line that really stuck out to me was, I'm kind of gonna go backwards, but like what our intellectual powers are for, the fact that we are supposed to use them to on ourselves, and like how we react to things and how we can better able not be so consumed by the emotional reaction
Yeah.
of, let's say, when a family member dies, to use a typical example in Stoicism or in life in general.
And I've been on both sides of the emotional spectrum when a family member dies.
Mm-hmm.
Like, in terms of the external reaction. I'm
Right.
not saying like when one person died, I felt a lot of emotions, and when the other person died, I didn't feel anything.
Right.
It's just that I processed it in completely different ways.
Mm-hmm.
And like this is one of the things where I think I've always agreed with Stoicism. Like, I mean, let me be real, okay? My experience with drugs taught me this. What you think and how you feel
Mm-hmm.
is very dependent on your biochemical makeup and how you look at the situation. And so Stoicism to me is predicated on the idea that you can train yourself to think of a situation in multiple different ways to construct a mental framework that allows you to deal with emotional turbulence in a more productive way.
Right.
Like, so, for example, like if somebody's on coke, it's very unlikely that they're going to be able to feel actual sadness when they're in the effect of the drug. Or like on LSD, you're going to feel whatever you feel, but like that's going to be pretty regardless of like
Yeah.
anything going on in your mind prior to that or after.
Yep.
So that kind of taught me that my perspective of the world is changeable.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the key. I mean, I'm not advocating that people go do a bunch of drugs, okay?
No.
But the thing is that I am advocating is that the way that you look at the world can change, and sometimes it should.
Right.
Because if you find yourself to be the type of person who's always depressed, not necessarily by things going on in your personal life, but just things going on in the world
Mm-hmm.
that are only relevant to you when you look at the broader scope of humanity,
Right.
maybe focus more on what you personally have going on. Maybe try to contribute to those situations that you do find depressing in ways that are personally meaningful to you without necessarily tying yourself to the results of that, because you don't have any control over who votes for who, for example.
Right.
Or for whom. I'm kidding.
Mm-hmm.
So just vote your conscience, let the result go, and learn to live with what happens. Because sometimes that's all you can do. And if you think the world should change, then work to change it. But like, be aware that just because you're acting in a certain way and desiring a certain result, that doesn't mean you're gonna get it.
Right.
And I might be making it sound easy, but man, the world has kicked me in the balls more times than I can count. I'm alive. I'm clear-headed, and for the first time in a very long time, and for a very long time now, pretty long time, I'd actually consider myself to be pretty emotionally healthy, relatively speaking. So, take that for what it's worth.
Yeah.
I mean, I still have strong views on things that I've thought about for a long time, but that doesn't mean, I automatically slam people I disagree with or anything. What do you think?
I would say you're pretty emotionally healthy and balanced.
It didn't really change my personality as much as people think
Oh,
it does.
no.
It really doesn't do that at all. If anything, it makes you more who you are rather than trying to figure out what mask to wear.
Yeah. It's just a matter of being comfortable with yourself,
Yeah,
I think.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And honestly, I'm more ridiculous now than I ever have been.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm
Yeah, he transformed into a dragon. A Pokemon, actually.
yeah. See, I am Charizard.
Yeah.
Dude, this camera's annoying me. Like, damn.
You'll see your Charizard face. Yeah.
Alright, oh yeah, you read the last one, right?
Yeah, so we're on 10.
Oh, we're on to
Or I mean 13. The
dude.
next one.
Okay, you gotta give me that. Because I was like, wait a minute. Okay, 13. Nothing is more pathetic than people who run around in circles, delving into the things that lie beneath and conducting investigation into the souls of people around them, never realizing that all you have to do is be attentive to the power inside you and worship it sincerely. To worship it is to keep it from being muddied with turmoil and becoming aimless and dissatisfied with nature. I was going to say human nature. Divine and human, there we go. What is divine deserves our respect because it is good. What is human deserves our affection because it is like us. And our pity too, sometimes, for its inability to tell good from bad, its terrible blindness as the kind that can't tell white from black. So, I mean, you know, how do I put this? So, I've talked about this before because Epictetus, but the Greeks believed that what separated the human animal from the other animals was our capacity to reason, to think, to change the way we think, to choose how we react, and to the capacity that we exercise that faculty, we are like the gods because they saw the gods as like sort of a supreme power.
Yeah.
But like even now, I think to me that is what makes us the most human thing, or whatever, the most divine we can be. I don't know.
Right.
Words. Our ability to think and to choose according to what we value as individuals and as a collective, I think is what makes us different from other animals. Like, you know, dogs, if you treat them well, they're going to treat you well regardless of if you're a dick to every other person. And I've seen this. So, like, I mean, dog lovers, I respect all of you. Y'all tend to think dogs can just tell when you're a shitty human being. And they can if you're just generally shitty. But if you're nice to them and shitty to everyone else, they don't know.
Yeah.
They don't know. They know that you're nice to them. They know that you feed them. They know that you care for them. And that's what they know.
Mm-hmm.
They respond to that. But we as people can see past that. And our ability to do that and to choose based on the data we gather is what makes us completely different. And it, to me, like I've always, my personal conception of whatever God might be has always been the collective will and action of the human race. Because we have the ability to like build amazing shit.
Yeah.
And we have the ability to utterly destroy everything and ourselves at the same time, both on a personal level and on a global scale.
Yeah.
And to me, that is exactly what the myth of any god in any mythology has meant.
Right.
What's up, Leroy?
Yeah, what's up?
So, I mean, whether you agree with my view of that or not is not really what I'm talking about. But, like, just like Marcus is saying, if you're just delving into the souls of others just to do it, like, what are you doing?
Yep.
When what you really should be doing is respecting the fact that you have the faculty to think and choose.
Yep. Exactly.
Oh, yep. Charizard beanie for the win.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Next.
Yeah.
All right. Even if you're going to live 3,000 more years, or 10 times that, remember, you cannot lose another life than the one you're living now, or live another one than the one you're losing. The longest amounts to the same as the shortest. The present is the same for everyone. Its loss is the same for everyone. And it should be clear that a brief instant is all that is lost, for you can't lose either the past or the future. How could you lose what you don't have? Remember two things. One, that everything has always been the same and keeps recurring, and it makes no difference whether you see the same things recur in 100 years or 200, or in an infinite period. And two, that the longest lived and those who will die soonest lose the same thing. The present is all that they can give up, since that is all you have, and what you do not have, you cannot lose.
Yeah, so that's one thing I learned from Zazen, if I'm being completely real about where I got this from, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's cool to read it, but it's another thing to completely fucking experience it.
Oh, yeah.
Like, if you sit long enough, whether you choose to sit with your eyes closed, whether or not you choose to sit staring at a wall, or you choose to pick up some Tibetan beads and chant until your brain goes numb, however that works. At least that's how I describe it.
However you get there.
It just kind of goes somewhere, and then shit happens.
Yeah.
I don't know how to explain it, but that's all three ways work.
Hell, I would even say if you're like tired or even a little sleep deprived and you're just contemplating things, that happens too. I've had that experience.
Yeah.
Because it was just the not only the intellectual part just leads to that feeling of, I guess, voidness,
Yeah.
emptiness,
So
as they would call it, the Buddhists.
yeah,
Yeah, so
Dr. Schubert used to call it suchness. It was weird.
yeah, I've seen that term as well.
Yeah.
And I was gonna add that it was the fact that I was sleep deprived that led me to that experience, like just thinking about it. And I was like, oh, like I didn't get sufficient sleep, so my body's kind of slow, my cognition's slow, but I'm still breathing, my heart is beating, and you know the combination of all that. I was just like, oh, it's just a cycle all the time. That's why it's called a circadian rhythm.
Yeah, exactly. On the I guess I hesitate to use the word mystical because it's not really mystical.
Yeah.
I mean,
I mean, I don't know. That word has a lot of baggage too.
I don't like language. I like language, but not when it's muddy.
Yeah.
But there comes a point. I've tried various forms of meditation, and to me, they all basically do the same thing. Hindu people disagree with me. They really do, like hard. But they all sort of put you in a state that is other than your ordinary state. So, like, I remember meditating one night,
Yeah.
and I realized that when I switched my focus to either a sensation in the body or my breath or whatever, or some kind of elaborate visualization, all the sensations that were associated with sadness, anxiety, or whatever else kind of melted away.
Right.
And when you realize that, it's much like you were saying, like all this stuff that goes on in your mind is just cyclical based on patterns that you were conditioned to inhabit.
Right.
And so you get these little glimpses of what the unconditioned kind of equanimous mind.
Equanimous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would be, right? And then on the flip side, it's like you figure out that you can't, in my opinion, you can't inhabit that state of mind all the time.
Right.
But from that state of mind, you start to understand that like what is true of the individual human in general is also true of the collective.
Yeah.
So we all act in terms of what we find pleasurable or joyful, and we sort of try to avoid the things that we find abhorrent.
Yeah, or uncomfortable.
Right, which is how we make it's how we make daily decisions, it's how we make lifelong decisions, it's how we make political choices, but all based on this perception of what
we think is
what we think is good versus bad, right?
yeah.
And we think that our problems are all novel, but if you know enough about history to see the broad strokes of everything, the same problems keep cropping up like perennial molds.
That's interesting that you bring that up because when I was working, both of my coworkers, we were all talking about not only politics but also like the history of different empires. For
Yeah.
example, the Spanish conquering the Americas, and we lost all that knowledge from the Aztecs and Mayans, like philosophy, astronomy, the art, and
And they had a really, really complicated, sophisticated way of tracking movement of the stars.
yeah. And I was saying that that whole obsession with white skin, because there's a lot of light skinned people in Mexico, and if you watch news in Mexico, because my grandmother, she would always watch that stuff, a lot of them were light skinned. And we were talking about how like darker skinned people in Mexico were still like living in poverty or were discriminated against.
Yep.
And that's something a lot of people don't actually know, not even Latinos that were born in this country.
Are you serious?
I've encountered a few, yeah.
What?
I don't want to make a blanket statement, but the ones I've encountered, it's like they don't really know unless they've gone there or they've had family that they've interacted with. But it was just something that I've noticed.
I don't. What?
Yeah. Yeah,
What?
I call it imperial culture. That's what I call it. Like,
No, that's a good name, but like, I mean, how do you not know it's there? I mean, it's pretty obvious.
if you're not paying attention to the country, I guess it's invisible to you.
I mean, because the same thing is true in the Philippines, dude.
Yeah, that's another point that we all brought up this morning. So, yeah,
To think,
I think I made my point. I think there was another point, but you go ahead.
I'm gonna make a very blanket statement because I know it's right because I've thought about it for decades.
Mm-hmm.
All right, our problems are not new.
No.
What changes is the way we decide to deal with them, how they are manifested, and the scale at which they exist.
Yep.
Not the problems themselves. We still have problems with slavery, even though slavery was technically abolished
Yeah.
long ago. We still have poverty, we still have hunger, we still have familial and political infighting.
Yep.
All the shit that we condemn the Roman Empire for, dude, has existed prior to the Roman Empire and will exist long after this country is dust in the history books.
Pretty much. It's gonna keep going until the planet blows up or the sun blows up.
And why is that the case? Because we're human.
Yeah.
That's neither good nor bad. It just
Mm-hmm.
that's why.
Yeah.
I mean, would I ideally like to see some kind of mass enlightenment of humanity where some of these problems literally eradicate themselves? Yeah, but that's not going to happen.
Right.
I'm idealistic in that I think it can get better, but I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Even though some people have tried to go for that hope that, oh, that's possible, but I'm in the boat with you. I don't think that's gonna happen.
No.
Nanomachines, anything like that, I don't think that's gonna help you. If anything, it's gonna create new problems.
Yeah, because what has been true of humanity since our birth as a species, as Homo sapiens, will continue to be true of Homo sapiens until our species is no longer the dominant species of life on the planet.
Yeah.
Period. There's no other thing that can happen.
Mm-hmm.
It can improve in some areas and degrade in others, but it's not going to be substantially different in the sense that, like, we're not going to have the same kinds of problems.
Right.
Oh, it's going to go to 0. I'm just kidding. Let me see. What are we on?
We're on 15.
everything is just an impression. Monimus the cynic. And the response is obvious enough, but the point is a useful one, if you take it for what it's worth. And that's what I was talking about. The Stoics believed very heavily in the idea of the framing effect, right?
Yeah.
So if I have a negative emotion, I've literally done this. I'm like, oh, you're just a figment of the imagination and not at all the thing you claim to represent.
Yeah.
And believe it or not, as cheesy as it sounds, dude, it works.
Mm-hmm.
It works.
Yep.
Because you're like, oh, I'm just having a thought. Like, it's not the real thing that it's not the thing that I'm actually thinking about that is happening. It's just the thought is eliciting a certain kind of emotional reaction.
Right, right.
So just knowing that and being aware of that and admitting that, like, it takes a lot of the sting out. It doesn't always solve the problem.
Yep.
But it does give you enough space to say, okay, I'm having this kind of reaction happen. How do I want to deal with it?
Yeah.
And dude, when I'm really angry, I just go work out.
Mm-hmm.
And usually after about an hour of doing that, I'm a lot better.
Yeah.
And sometimes I be getting really angry. All right, dude, 16.
The human soul degrades itself, one, above all, when it does its best to overcome an abscess, a kind of detached growth on the world. To be disgruntled at anything that happens is a kind of secession from nature, which compromises the nature of all things. When it turns its back on another person or sets out to do it harm, as the souls of the angry do. 3, when it is overpowered by pleasure or pain. 4, when it puts on a mask and does or says something artificial or false. And 5, when it allows its action and impulse to be without a purpose, to be random and disconnected. Even the smallest things ought to be directed toward a goal, but the goal of rational beings is to follow the rule and law of the most ancient of communities and states.
All right, I know you have to have thoughts on this.
Yeah, sometimes when I read this passage, and there are similar passages, I kind of think of it as like a prescription for nihilism, for dealing with nihilism.
Okay, like the antidote to nihilism.
Yeah, pretty much. But it's another one of those like philosophy as a type of medicine or ointment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's go over this one by one because I think it's worth dissecting.
Yeah.
Right? So the lead into each of these statements is the human soul degrades itself.
Mm-hmm.
Above all, when it does its best to become an abscess, a kind of detached growth of secession from nature.
Yeah.
Which comprises
compromises.
Which compromises
or comprises the nature of all things.
I said comprises and you corrected me, quote unquote.
My bad.
So like to me what that means is when you use philosophy to escape the reality of life.
Yeah.
Right? For example, extreme solipsism or egoism.
Right.
One example of this, it's a philosophy. Solipsism, for those of you that, I mean, the quick and dirty version is like you act and think as if like you are literally the only person in the world, and everything else is kind of this holodeck, and so therefore the only thing that really matters is you.
Yep.
Or extreme egoism, where you're basically out for your own self-interest at all costs. The Stoics believed that to be entirely irrational.
Right.
Because they believed that in order to keep the world going and in order to make it any better than it is, we have to maintain a network of interconnectedness in humanity.
Yep.
Right? So you take the second one then, I guess.
Well, intentions matter a lot, so when it turns its back on another person or sets out to do it harm. Thing is, like, yeah, this is pretty much against like any intentional harm you do to people. Revenge, I think about, but there's gonna come a point where we might disappoint someone or make someone angry by our actions because maybe we offended them, their sense of good and bad. So it's not saying like don't piss anyone off. It's saying don't
intentionally
intentionally.
do another person harm.
Yeah, because like the calculated coldness of getting to the top or ruining someone's life, uh, that does bad things to the human soul, and that's what that's saying.
Yeah, I lived in that for a while.
Yeah, so try your best not to do that.
When it is overpowered by pleasure or pain.
Pleasure or pain.
So the thing about that, and there's neurological evidence to back up part of this. So like if you have a chronic pain condition, right?
Mm-hmm.
Certain neural pathways in your brain are reinforced, and they typically are neural pathways that are often associated with negative, pessimistic thinking and very volatile emotions.
Yeah.
And so that's why a lot of people with chronic pain that successfully manage it also end up in some kind of cognitive therapy to assist with like not becoming reliant on pain medication.
Right.
Or like if I've even seen people go the therapy only approach when they have chronic pain issues because they are afraid of chemical dependency, which I totally respect.
Yeah.
Chemicals are dangerous if not used in the proper mindset. I would know. I use lots of chemicals back in the day. And I don't think, like, one of the most dangerous mentalities we have in the West is the idea that doctors know better than you in all things, and that if they prescribe something to you as a medication, then it's fine. Period.
Yeah.
Without further, like, there's no semicolon, there's no comma with a space, there's nothing. It's just that's the end of the sentence, and that is not how to treat medicine.
Yeah.
Because especially with things like opioids, I've seen that destroy so many people, and they started out using them legitimately.
Mm-hmm.
Because they got into an accident or they have a chronic pain condition. And like back in the day, we used to dose people using what they call titrating doses, which means like you just subsequently basically double the dose as soon as you reach a certain level of tolerance, and you do that basically indefinitely. And we didn't really completely understand the effects of doing that, and in part because of that, we created a segment of people that had huge addiction issues with opiate medications, and they ended up addicted to things like heroin, Oxycontin,
right,
Roxy, all this other stuff. And so that's the other thing, right? Like, when the mind becomes overpowered by pleasure or pain, I'm talking about the pain side because it's the easiest to talk about.
Right.
It can force you into making decisions that your otherwise clear-headed self would not make. So just being aware of that is the absolute most important thing, which is why it took so long. My bad. What's the next one?
Number 4. Or yeah.
Is it 4?
Yeah. When it puts on a mask or does or says something artificial or false. Yeah, that one's a fun one.
Go for it. You go.
The example of working at a retail store, you see that all the time. In fact, sometimes you got to play the part. But I've met people who can't seem to get out of that mode.
Hmm.
It's like how they interact with others, and I'm like, why are you so fake? Like, I'll give an example. A coworker that I work with, he's a recent hire. He is from the East Coast, and according to him, he's a legendary R&B singer from the East West.
Then he very clearly is not.
Yeah, and the way he interacts with people, the way he tries to talk to people, it's like he's always trying to sell or upsell, like sell himself basically. And I'm like, oh, this guy's a BSer basically. That was my first thought when I met him. And it's showing because my other coworkers have told me other things that, yeah.
Honestly, dude, from my admittedly relatively little experience with people from that specific area of the East Coast,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm guessing somewhere like New York, right?
Yeah, something.
That area tends to breed a certain kind of hustle as part of the culture. And usually a lot of it is posturing.
Yeah.
And like when you really get down to look at the person's life, you start to realize that it's not just embellishment, right? Embellishment is building on something that's true. Usually they just outright lie until they get somewhere they can actually talk about.
Yeah, right. So, yeah.
But like the more practical way of like expanding on that would be the Stoic underpinning of the idea that when you that book Willpower, for example,
Mm-hmm.
that you read a while back, talked about when we are forced to do things that we would otherwise not want to do,
Yeah.
it erodes willpower. Willpower, despite what people think, willpower is not like a muscle. It is a finite resource.
Yeah.
And when you run out of it, you have things like huge mental breakdowns.
Mm-hmm.
Different people have different capacities. And studies have shown that rather than doing fake shit, what we ought to do is set up a lifestyle that reinforces habits that we want to cultivate rather than lifestyles that force us to avoid the things we don't want. And that's how we find better success. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, what I've learned talked about that. The book you read talked about that. That dude cites all his sources. I kind of dig that.
Right, right.
Because then my nerdy ass gets to go look at all the stuff. And you want me to go to 5?
Well, I was just gonna say, like, also, like, I think about people who, like, they think the mask is, like, who they are when it's really not.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's really kind of why I encourage people to do some kind of meditation or self-reflection.
Right, because you can easily lose yourself.
Like I genuinely like if I make someone mad by saying this, I don't care. I don't care if you're into journaling, if you're into meditation or yoga or not, find a way to engage in self-reflection. Everyone needs it. I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're an extrovert, an introvert. I don't care if you're predisposed or not to self-reflection. It is a necessary part of the world we live in. Otherwise, it is so easy to drown
Yeah.
in expectation, desire, messaging from social media, all that stuff. Get
Mm-hmm.
to know who you are because chances are you're an all right person.
Yep.
Like the vast majority of people are fairly decent human beings.
Yeah.
Despite some of the cynical things I've said today, like I do actually believe that. I just don't think humanity on the whole is going to change that drastically.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't mean I don't think the vast majority of people are decent.
Yeah.
Because you're right, there are people that just, I mean, they think the mask is who they are.
And sometimes they will do certain actions that don't really reflect who they are.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it creates a lot of turmoil inside, and not to mention outward consequences.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's what I was really trying to say with that example.
It makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
So are we on to numero cinco?
Yep.
The soul degrades itself when it allows its action and impulse to be without purpose, to be random and disconnected. Even the smallest things ought to be directed toward a goal. But the goal of rational beings is to follow the rule of law of the most ancient of communities and states. So, like, the Stoics literally believed in a human brotherhood because we all have the capacity to reason.
Yep.
It could be termed a rational soul. And because of that, to some extent, ideally, the Stoic would say, like, you're my brother insofar as we share the same capacity for reason, so let us try to see if we can come to a damn understanding.
Yep.
Yeah.
And like I like the first part of that line, even the smallest things ought to be directed toward a goal. That's, for me, that's something I think about when I really don't want to do anything, i.e. depression.
Oh, yeah, I got that.
Yeah, like even the smallest things like brushing your teeth or washing yourself, like they're small things, but I mean, it beats like feeling aimless and without purpose.
Yeah, you know, you just finished reading Man's Search for Meaning,
Yeah.
which is one of my favorite books that I didn't want to read. Like, I wanted to read it because I knew I was messing up, but like I didn't want to read it because I knew it was gonna expose things that I just wasn't doing. And you know, Viktor Frankl famously said, "A man who has a why for a living can endure anyhow."
Yeah, which he said that quote was from Friedrich Nietzsche.
Who in turn stole it from ideas like these. And I'm pretty sure because, I mean, Epictetus said remarkably similar things. You could argue that they existed in parallel, and that's fair, but Nietzsche was fully aware of the Stoics.
Yeah, he talked shit about him.
Yeah, he really misrepresented, mischaracterized both the people and the philosophy. But
yeah, not to mention some talk shit about Buddhism too, but no one really understood that in the West.
Yeah, not at that time, not at all.
Yeah.
But
yeah, but that's the takeaway quote that I would argue the thesis of the book.
it's literally burned in my brain. I will never forget it as long as I live.
Yeah.
Because I remember, like, if I have a reason to live, I can put up with a lot. And I've seen that in my own life.
Yeah, mine too.
And I can put up with it long enough to make it better. And like I've seen you do the same thing.
Yeah. Sometimes like the impact of it won't really hit until you reflect on your life.
Right.
You contemplate it, which is why meditation and all that is useful. Hell, just contemplation leads to it. But I don't know if you want to really go over split hairs of definitions of meditation versus contemplation, but I tend to equate them to be the same.
Yeah, it just depends on the mindset going in.
Yeah, but yeah, reflecting on your life, that's very important. And the Stoics clearly advise it.
I think, man, in the West at least, we've associated meditation with sitting cross-legged and like thinking of nothing.
Right.
And if you actually study various forms of meditation as well as practice them, you quickly realize that there are so many ways to meditate. I remember getting into a fruitless debate with someone who said the Stoics never meditated, they just walked along the shores and shit.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, what do you think that was for?
Yeah.
And, some people don't get it.
Yeah, that the word itself is not an Eastern invention. It comes from Latin.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just when we translated all that stuff from the East, that was probably one of the closest words that they could use to capture that idea or that experience.
And I mean, whether it's like taking a walk in the park or like going on a hike or swimming until your mind settles and like everything all of a sudden like has some kind of clarity
Yeah.
because you can hear the sound of the water and feel it on your body and you feel fucking
Yeah,
weight.
yeah, there's a
It's all
certain
the same thing, dude.
yeah.
It's all the same thing. I don't care how you do it.
Mm-hmm.
Just as long as it ain't drinking. That's not meditating.
Yeah.
Neither is doing a bunch of lines of coke, all right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
that's not meditation.
No.
Taking something into your body to achieve a mind state other than what you have does not in itself constitute a meditative activity.
Yeah, I pretty much agree.
And I'm not willing to change my point of view on that. As someone who's done a lot of that, I know the difference. You know what? We should just finish book 2.
Yeah, well, there's only one more thing.
Yeah. You want me to read it or you want to read it?
I'll read this one.
Okay.
This is one we read the other day. It's one of my favorites.
Yeah.
Yeah. Human life, duration momentary, nature changeable, perception dim, condition of body decaying, soul spinning around, fortune unpredictable, lasting fame uncertain. Sum up, the body and its parts are a river, the soul a dream and mist. Life is warfare and a journey far from home. Lasting reputation is oblivion. Then what can guide us? Only philosophy, which means making sure that the power within stays safe and free from assault, superior to pleasure and pain, doing nothing randomly or dishonestly and with imposture, not dependent on anyone else's doing something or not doing it, and making sure that it accepts what happens and what it is dealt as coming from the same place it came from. And above all, that it accepts death in a cheerful spirit, as nothing but the dissolution of the elements from which each living thing is composed. If it doesn't hurt the individual elements to change continually into one another, why are people afraid of all of them changing and separating? It's a natural thing, and nothing natural is evil.
You know, the biggest takeaway here for me, the way to sum that up for me personally would be hold on, let me pick the exact. Making sure that the power within stays safe and free from assault, superior to pleasure and pain, doing nothing randomly or dishonestly or with imposture. Like, the Stoics were talking about something pretty similar to the notion of that buzzword authenticity long before that was a thing in our modern parlance.
Right.
Basically, don't be a fake muff.
Pretty much.
I mean, honestly, most people like. Okay, so let me be a douchebag real quick. Because let me tell you what that doesn't mean. Because I've had people pull this shit. All right, so I'm literally Gimpy. I don't just call myself Captain Gimpy as a joke.
Nope.
I have CP, right? And so when I pull this on somebody, their reaction is to say something like, "Oh, you want me to treat you like everybody else," and then they do something very asshole-like. That's not authentic.
No.
Because what that is an expression of your like pain mutated into action.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Whatever anger you're holding on to, whatever like sadness you got that you're wrestling with, that's just lashing out. And you think that's being you because that's what you've come to identify with.
Yeah.
But that's really just a blockage within yourself. Right? So if you are one of those people that feels that urge the next time someone different than you says, "I just want to be treated like everyone else," and your first instinct is to act like a complete fucking dick.
Yeah.
Don't. Just don't. Walk away.
Mm-hmm.
Don't go to a bar. Don't go talk shit about the person of your best friend. Go somewhere and actually think about what makes you want to react that way.
Right.
Because chances are, for the most part, the vast majority of people that I've met and stayed in contact with over the years that reacted that way to me initially had come to realize that they were just angry at something that they couldn't let go of.
Yeah.
And I was just the person to say you're fucking up. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
So be very clear, because like most people, dude, most people don't walk around wanting to be a complete asshole to everyone on the planet.
No.
Some people do, but that I really believe that's a minority of people. Unfortunately, some people in that minority really have some serious power, and they shouldn't.
Yep.
But I really do believe that most of those people are just really like dealing with something they can't identify or deal with. So the next time that happens to you, just walk away, man. Fighting 9 times out of 10, not worth it.
Yep.
Saying that mean shit you have in your head that you've been stewing on for like fucking months, and it just seems like the perfect opportunity to like let it out on someone, don't.
Mm-hmm.
Because most of the time, if you let it, like, dude, you got to find another way to vent that.
Yeah.
Like, go talk to somebody. Like, dude, I'm a huge advocate of finding a good therapist if you need it. Like, there's no shame in that. If you're depressed or you're angry, you need fucking help, and go talk to somebody. Dude.
Yeah.
I mean, I've talked to a lot of people who needed someone to talk to online. And I don't know who they are. I still don't know who they are. But, I mean, I'd like to think that at least some of those conversations helped someone somewhere.
Right.
Because I know that when you and I were going through shit like that, like, it was difficult, man. And it doesn't always have to be that hard.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to leave another reason I'm saying this, because I don't want to leave the stream on a sour note, dude.
No.
But, yeah, most of the time if you're angry, it's just because you got something that you have to process. If you're familiar with Healthy Gamer, Dr. K likes to call that a samskar, which is like a ball of emotion that remains unprocessed. I think of like, you know, do you remember the No Face from Spirited Away?
Yes.
You remember how like they were pulling a bunch of stuff out of him, but he was still giant, and then they pulled out the one thing, and then he just dissipated in form. It's like that. That's what a samskar is, basically, in visual form. It's that one thing that keeps you that dark, amorphous figure.
Yeah.
And usually once you figure out what it is and you start dealing, like, dude, it's not, sometimes your life circumstances change, sometimes they don't, but your life still changes.
Yep.
Because that thing is no longer getting in your way. You're beginning to understand it and integrate that lesson in different ways.
Yeah. And that's another reason why reflection is important, because if you don't really notice those small changes because they are very subtle.
Yeah.
But you can learn to like pick them up, and then it was like, oh, well, I noticed after I expressed what was going on in my head to my therapist or even a close, very, very close friend who understands you and you understand them.
Yep.
Like building that skill and noticing it, I think goes a long way.
And for a while, you might need someone else to tell you that you are actually making progress.
Yeah, yeah.
Because you can't notice it.
Yeah.
That's okay too. That doesn't make you stupid. It just means like you're not used to noticing minute changes like that because you can't always see them.
Right, right.
And for
There's actually, oh, sorry.
I was gonna say for Myers-Briggs people, if I sound like an ENFP, I'm not.
No.
It's just I learned how to talk like that.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. But because people don't want to listen to like my scientific breakdown of incremental mental and emotional.
Right.
It's easier just to say the things I said. But you were gonna say because you mentioned
there was a video I watched on YouTube about why the haunting piece of being lost. It's about getting lost in a video game and why that is so it can be so peaceful or what's the word?
alluring.
Not just alluring, but also like feeling freedom or whatever. Because the video makes by the way, this guy cites his sources because the video references psychological studies about how seeing nature or being in nature aids recovery, both psychological and physical. And because our culture has become so computerized recently, as I'll put it, like there are more movies and TV shows to watch. There are more pictures, images, and video games, which are just 3D simulations. Like nowadays, 3D simulations or 2D simulations of nature or fantastical things that,
Yeah,
you know, interest our brain. And he was saying that that's part of the reason why being lost in a video game is probably healthy. And he kind of made a slight joke about searching for the psychological benefits of loneliness in Google Scholar. He's like, yeah, I didn't find a lot of studies about that. Which I thought was kind of funny because
man, you gotta link me that video.
yeah, I think you would find it fascinating. But
Dude, well, I'm already there, dude.
I just thought that was interesting because there was a time when I was younger, I think I was in my early 20s, and I was feeling lonely, and I did search something about loneliness, and I remember I encountered a website. I don't remember the name, but this dude was basically making the case for being a loner. Like, loneliness has its benefits and its positives.
Was it Loner Wolf?
No, this was way before I encountered stuff like that.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's the case it was making, and I was like, I don't know. Even back then, when I was at my most emo and depressed,
Well, dude, something doesn't feel right.
yeah, something doesn't feel right, and so yeah, feeling lonely is generally not a good thing.
Nah, dude. Okay, so yeah, that's gonna get off on a whole tangent
Yeah.
because to me, there are types of loneliness,
Mm-hmm.
and each of those types needs something different.
Right.
Like, and I know this because my loneliness has not been cured by the things that I do, even though I'm doing all the things that all of the people have ever told me should help.
Right.
And they help, but it hasn't hit that spot.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're feeling lonely, like if you're one of those people, because I mean, dude, okay, so like if you care, I'm an ENTP. But there are times in my life where even when I'm around people, like, and I'm actually enjoying myself, there's still a gnawing feeling of like I'm right.
Right.
And some of that has to do with communication styles. Some of that has to do with not a lot of people can, dude. Even people that are similarly personalitied as
Yeah.
me can't handle the capacity for debate anymore because internet.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are like 50% of all personality types don't really enjoy debate at all
Right.
from that lens.
Yep.
Um, and so, I'm kind of, the ugly duckling, so to speak. Because, dude, when you and I get like heated about an issue, like, and we've researched like opposing viewpoints on it,
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah, it's intense, but like, it's kind of fun.
Yeah.
Like, it's like a boxing or fucking doing
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
with the brain,
Pretty much.
and that's fun to me.
Mm-hmm.
But like, it's not fun to a lot of people.
Yeah.
You run across that personally, like I know you have.
Yeah.
You were like, dude, I was just having to try to have a discussion about this. Like, I didn't even have a point of view. I was just trying to see what they thought, and like, it didn't go well. I'm like, nah, that happens.
Yeah. Well, hell, it even happened to the ancients.
Yeah, and I think that's why we argue. Like, no, we don't really fight, but we argue about things because it's kind of fun.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, I mean, even dumb things like Star Wars.
Oh, yeah, that's totally different tangent and
I mean, but like sometimes we'll just talk about like, things in the mythos and why certain things can't happen. It's a harmless way of like working out that faculty without treading into territory that'll deeply offend.
yeah,
Right?
yeah.
Yeah,
So
I don't think I have anything else to say.
yeah, I think I've said everything I wanted to say today.
Uh, I just want to reiterate, if you're depressed, if you need someone to talk to, like seriously find someone.
Yeah, please.
Like, it matters a lot. And I came from a culture where mental health just, it wasn't a thing.
Yeah, me too.
On two fronts. Like, you grew up, like, your grandma's like super traditionalist Mexican.
Yeah, and living with her,
Yeah.
experiencing it, like sometimes I think she would qualify for an obsessive compulsive disorder diagnosis. No joke.
And like, my grandma was from pre-US Hawaii,
Mm-hmm.
and my grandpa was from the Philippines, and he was in the military. And, so the mental health was not a thing.
Right.
I'm trying to change that. Like, me and my siblings and I, we have a lot of conversations about that type of thing, because I'm trying to make it okay for them to talk about the things that bother them and like realize that like it's okay to be confused, it's okay to feel fucked up and hurt.
Right.
It happens. It's part of what happens in life, but that doesn't mean like you're messed up. It doesn't mean you're crazy. It doesn't mean people won't love you. Like, dude, some people might not. Okay, the people you want that reaction from might not, but someone will. Someone will listen. I swear to God,
Mm-hmm.
that I don't believe in. uh, but yeah, I kind of want to close with that. Like, seriously, find someone to talk to. Find someone you trust, whether it's professional or personal relationship. Like, just don't, like, no matter where you're, don't try to do it by yourself. It's really hard.
Right.
It's hard enough with people in your corner, dude. It's hard by yourself. So if you need help, there are suicide hotlines that I'll probably put permanently in the description for YouTube. But yeah, it's important, dude. And
Yeah.
like, if any of what we talked about resonated with you on any level, you have any questions, dude, I'm not an authority, but like I'll try to help where I can.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been reading and thinking about this stuff and trying to do it for long enough to where like I think I can help you somewhat. So like if you're down, I'll talk to you. You don't like people knowing who you are because your internet name. constantly. So yeah.
All
All right, dudes. That's
right then.
we're just rambling. So we'll see you later.
Yep. We'll see you next time.
All right, dudes.